Good afternoon, my name is Lucía Rombolá and I am a master's student at the Universidade Federal da Fronteira Sul in Brazil with a scholarship of CNPq and a PhD student at CONICET in Argentina. The title of this presentation is Reference Frameworks based on historical sources and experimental designs for the study of archaeological sites in the lowlands of Southeastern South America, with Natacha, Mirian Carbonera, Daniel Loponte, Camilla Speller, J. Hilsden, and Lindsey Paskulin. The area of study of this project is Southeastern South America, where modern-day southern Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, and northeastern Argentina are. The selection of this area comes from my master's project on the Guaranis, their relationship with other groups, and environment through the historical fonts of the first Europeans that arrived at America. In this area, there were multiple societies with diverse ways of life and relationship with the environment. This included hunter-gatherer groups as well as groups with varying levels of early agriculture. Archaeological units were developed to group the material culture of different human societies. As an example, and to relate later with what I will be analyzing, I will show a map of northeastern Argentina, where we can see the Itararetacuara, Guarani, Goya Malabrigo, and hunter-gatherers archaeological units. From the arrival of the Europeans on the American continent in the 16th century, we begin to find written records containing detailed descriptions of the peoples who lived there. In the area considered in this study, European presence was predominantly Spanish and Portuguese. Specifically, in southern Brazil, the earliest presence was Spanish, but the Portuguese crown eventually asserted dominance. This shift has resulted in the initial evidence of contact being less frequently analyzed in Brazilian academic contexts. Therefore, the historical fonts I mainly work with are Voyage to Rio de la Plata, Paraguay and Brazil, written by Ulrich Schmidl, the commentaries of Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, written by his secretary Pedro Hernández, and Natural History of the West Indies, written by Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo y Valdés. These historical sources describe the names of indigenous peoples, the places they inhabited, their customs, modes of subsistence, relationship with other groups, and their material culture. Here I will show as an example the names of the groups mentioned in Ulrich Schmidl's text, and also the drawings that show the Carios, another name used to describe the Guarani, and the Timbues. Regarding the material culture in the fonts, different types of artifacts are mentioned, such as axes, ornaments, beds, arrows, and pots. Also, raw materials like ceramics, bones, stones, and shells, or even measurements or colors. Terrestrial animals, birds, and fish are mentioned too. Some characteristics help to identify the species. Often, the closeness of a species to a human group is described or the places where they are seen. Regarding the landscape and flora mentioned in the fonts, we can recognize vegetable species that are consumed by different human groups, rivers, forests, and their surrounding resources. These historical resources are variable since they contain written information of the first moments of contact of the Europeans and the indigenous peoples, so what is described almost reflects their reality before the arrival of the Europeans. However, they have to be analyzed with caution since they were written by dominant groups, so characterization of the environment and indigenous peoples are biased because they explain everything based on what they knew about the European continent. Similarly, archives can tell different stories about the same agents because people can make different assessments of what they see, or people's situations can change in space and time. On the other hand, linking archaeological material evidence with historical sources is challenging as it risks falling into direct analogies. In this regard, experimental archaeology contributes by expanding our understanding of past practices and allows us to establish correlations between historical sources and archaeological sites. In the lowlands of this area of study, we have undertaken various experimental designs to advance knowledge of the technological processes of past societies. Regarding ceramic technology, we conducted experiments to understand the methods and tool choices in making holes in pottery vessels. For the experimentation, we took into account the flora and fauna mentioned in the fonts that were related to the hunter-gatherer groups in the Paraná River to test their possible use in pottery making. In session 7, I will present this work entitled Ceramic Perforation Techniques in Hunter-Gatherer Sites from the Lower Paraná Wetland, an Experimental Approach. Regarding bone technology, there is evidence of a great diversity of tools such as harpoons, polishers, awls, ornaments, and a great variety of points. These tools have been associated with the timbues, chana timbues, that are mentioned in the historical fonts. To better understand the use of these tools, some functional analyses have been made. In Natacha book's doctoral thesis, hypotheses of use taken from the fonts were addressed by doing experimentation and comparing the traces left at the archaeological collection and the experimental tools. As an example, I show a polisher that has microwear traces at the tip that evidence the action of perforating skin and vegetables. I will talk more about these tools in presentation in session 7. This month, I have started my PhD project related on the manufacture process of the bone tools from the Lower Paraná wetland. I will focus on the selection of raw material. In some tools, the bone used is recognizable, like the polishers on fish spines or the awl made with the distal metapodium of a cervid. However, the level of formatization of other tools like harpoons, points, and hooks does not allow us to recognize the bone support nor the species. For this reason, we started to work with the University of British Columbia that has a laboratory where they make SUMS analysis to identify the species. In this process, collagen fibers are destroyed to obtain peptides, which differ in type and sequence depending on the species, what will make us identify the species use. Firstly, we started making a library with the local species available. Later, we sent some archaeological tools to contrast the results with the library. In our first results, we could see that to make those points, camelids were mainly used, but there is also evidence of peccary and canid. These tools appear in hunter-gatherer sites. However, one appeared in a Guarani site in the Isla Martín García in Argentina, which makes us think in the complexity of the exchange, conflict, and communication networks among the indigenous peoples. The next process to test the selection of raw material is to do some physical tests to determine the mechanical properties of elements used as bone support and to evaluate their influence on raw material selectivity. To date, the technology development model for the Paraná River wetland area is based on current data from other species and regions, so we have to undertake the analysis with the local species. We will see compression, tension, torsion, shear, and bending, as well as the relation between load and deformation. Later, we plan to continue with an experimental approach by testing the bone elements of species obtained in the SUMS analysis, continually analyzing the points to find hypotheses to test with the experimental design, use local raw materials in the experimentation, such as shells and lithics, and analyze the manufacture traces in the archaeological collection. This is a study that is just starting, so comments and recommendations are welcome. Thank you all for your attention.